Original owner deceased 1983. No heirs of record. County tax forfeiture sale. We will open the bid at $90,000. The auctioneer was 58 years old. His name was Hal Reeves. He had been calling Boone County tax auctions for 19 years. He had never seen the man in the back row before. The room held 34 people. 3 were county officials. 1 was a representative from Heritage Land Holdings out of St. Louis, a 36-year-old named Daniel Whitcomb in a charcoal suit and a watch he checked twice in 5 minutes. The rest were local bidders, a farmer from across the highway, a pair of developers from Columbia, 2 cousins from the Pettis County line. The parcel was 180 acres. The Whitaker tract, north of Centralia, Missouri. Worked for 52 years, taxes paid every March, fence lines maintained by hand. The man in the back row was 72 years old. He was wearing a brown suit, ironed the night before. He had a metal box on his lap. He had not spoken yet. The auctioneer raised his gavel. 90,000. Do I hear 90? Daniel from Heritage opens at 90. 95 anywhere? The man stood up. He did not raise his hand. He did not wave the box. He walked slowly from the back row toward the front of the room. Each step on the wooden floor of the auctioneer's gavel paused midair. The man stopped at the front table. He set the metal box down on it. My name is Earl Whitaker, he said. I was born September 4th, 1952. I have not been deceased. The room went quiet. Daniel Whitcomb looked up from his folder. He smiled. It was a small smile. He shook his head once. Sir, he said, we have a death certificate. Earl Whitaker did not answer. He opened the latch on the box. Earl Whitaker was born in Centralia, Boone County, Missouri, on September 4th, 1952. His father rented a corner of another man's farm for 31 years and died in a hospital bed without owning a single acre. The week of the funeral, Earl was 19 years old. He stood in the parking lot afterward and made one promise, quietly, to no one. In 1972, he was 20 years old and working 2 jobs. He drove a milk route in the morning and laid asphalt in the afternoon. He saved every dollar he could not avoid spending. In November of that year, he bought 40 acres of bottomland off Highway VV from a widow named Doris Lemon. The price was $11,200. He paid $2,000 down. He carried the rest at 7% interest over 12 years. The land had a creek running through the north end and a stand of oaks along the western fence. The barn was leaning when he bought it. He shored it up alone over 3 weekends in the spring of 1973. He bought the next 60 acres in 1981 from the Hartman estate, then 80 more in pieces, 20 here, 30 there, the last lot in 1994. By the time he was 42 years old, he owned 180 acres outright. There was no inheritance. There was no head start. There were missed Christmases, and there was one bad year in 1986 when the corn came in at half what it should have. He sold his truck that year and bought it back in 1988. He met Margaret Lacey in 1976. She was a school teacher in Sturgeon. They were married in 1977. She moved into the farmhouse the next spring. They had no children. They had each other and they had the land, and Margaret said once that those were the same thing if you understood it right. Margaret kept the records. She was the one who noticed first, in October of 1983, when their bank called to say Earl's account had been frozen because of a death notice filed with the county. Earl was 31 years old. He drove to the county records office that afternoon. The clerk who had filed the notice, her name was Linda Frey, admitted the error within 10 minutes. She showed him the file. 2 folders had been switched. There was an Earl Whitaker with 2 T's who had died of a heart attack in Madison County the week before. His file had been mailed to Boone County by mistake. The death notice had been entered under Earl Whitaker, single T, Boone County. Linda Frey filed an affidavit of error. She had Earl sign it. She took a copy home. He gave it to Margaret. Margaret put it in a metal box she kept in the closet of the spare bedroom. She kept every tax receipt after that, every certified mail confirmation, every letter from the county, every page of property assessment. She labeled the folders by year in her handwriting in blue ink from 1983 forward, 41 years. Margaret died of cancer on March 11, 2019. She was 67 years old. Earl buried her on the property, under the oak tree at the western fence line, in a plot they had agreed on a decade before. A month before she died, she said something to him from the hospital bed. She said, "Don't move the box. Don't throw anything out." They make these mistakes more than once. Earl did not move the box. He did not throw anything out. In April of 2024, a letter arrived at the farmhouse. It was addressed to the estate of Earl Whitaker, deceased. It said the property was being placed on the Boone County tax auction list as an abandoned estate with no heirs of record. He read it once, then again. Then he carried it to the closet of the spare bedroom and set it inside the box. That was 41 years after Margaret had first put a folder in there. Daniel Whitcomb was 36 years old. He had an MBA from Washington University in St. Louis. He had been working for Heritage Land Holdings for 4 years. His title was Asset Acquisitions Manager. He was paid a base salary plus a quarterly bonus tied to acquired acreage. Heritage Land Holdings had been founded in 2019. It had a Delaware address and an office on the 14th floor of a building in Clayton. Its business model was simple. It identified rural properties listed in county tax auctions as abandoned or estate forfeit. It purchased them at auction for between 10% and 30% of their appraised value. It resold them within 18 months, usually to commercial developers or larger agricultural concerns. Its annual report listed acquired acreage in 7 states. The Boone County contract had been signed in January of 2024. Heritage had paid the county $40,000 for an advance list of 47 parcels coming up for auction over the following 18 months. Daniel Whitcomb had reviewed the list himself. He had flagged 11 properties as high-value targets. The Whitaker tract was at the top of the list, 180 acres, north of Centralia, no recorded deceased. 1983. He had spent 4 minutes on Earl Whitaker's file, 2 minutes scanning the parcel data, 1 minute confirming the appraisal estimate at $1, $4 million, 1 minute writing a note in the margin. Low risk, no recent county activity. He had not pulled the property tax payment history. He had not checked whether the parcel had been paying property taxes for the 41 years since the owner's recorded death. He had not noticed that those payments had been made every March by check, drawn on a Centralia bank account with a memo line that read, "Property tax, Whitaker tract." He had not noticed because the auction list said no heirs of record, and he did not believe that property taxes paid by a dead man required further explanation. He was not the first person at Heritage to do this. Heritage had acquired 31 parcels in this manner across 4 states. Most had gone through without challenge. Twice, surviving relatives had filed claims after the fact and been bought out for nuisance settlements averaging $14,000. Daniel Whitcomb had arrived at the Boone County Courthouse that morning at 9:42. He had bought a coffee from the gas station across the street. He had walked into the auction room at 10:23. He had been told by an associate that the bidding on the Whitaker tract would likely close at $180,000, a 13% acquisition rate on a property they would resell within 10 months for full appraisal value. He had 4 minutes invested in Earl Whitaker. He had a return projection of $22 million. He was already looking at the next parcel on the list when Earl Whitaker stood up from the back row. The box was steel. It had been manufactured in 1968 by a company in Indianapolis. The lid was hinged. The latch was brass. The paint had been green originally, and there were 2 scratches on the top where Margaret had pulled it down from the closet shelf over and over for 41 years. Inside, the folders were arranged by year. The earliest folder was labeled 1983 in Margaret's blue handwriting. The most recent was labeled 2023. Each folder contained that year's property tax receipt, paid in March, stamped by the Boone County Treasurer's Office. Each receipt was a thin yellow carbon, perforated at the top, signed by hand. Beneath the folders, at the bottom of the box, was a single envelope. The envelope was older than the folders. It was dated October 14th, 1983. The handwriting on the front was not Margaret's. It was a county clerk's. The name on the front was Earl Whitaker, with 1 T. Inside the envelope was the original affidavit of error. It was signed by Linda Frey, who had been the records clerk that day in 1983. It was signed by her supervisor, a man named Wendell Briggs, who had been the records director at the time. It was notarized by a notary public from Centralia named Helen Brookhart. It stated, in 3 plain sentences, that an error had been made on August 14, 1983, when the death record of Earl Whitaker of Madison County had been incorrectly filed under the name of Earl Whitaker of Boone County. It stated that the error had been corrected on October 14, 1983. It stated that Earl Whitaker of Boone County was a living person and that all records, claims, and entries pertaining to his deceased status were null. The affidavit had a file number written at the top in pencil. The number was BC 1983-2147. That file number could be cross-referenced in the Boone County Records Archive. Earl had carried the box to the auction in the back seat of his truck. He had driven from the farmhouse to the courthouse, the same route he had driven the morning of Margaret's funeral 5 years before. He had parked in the same space. In the courtroom, he set the box on the front table and opened the latch. His lawyer was not with him. He had hired a lawyer the week before, a man named Roy Patterson, 54 years old, who practiced out of a one-room office in Sturgeon. Patterson had told him the affidavit was a strong document. He had also told him there was no guarantee. He had said, "You should know, these things sometimes the paperwork goes one way and the ruling goes the other. Don't expect anything." Patterson had said he would come if Earl wanted him to. Earl had said he wanted to walk in alone. The latch on the box opened with a small metallic sound. The room could hear it. Daniel Whitcomb did not move from his chair. He looked at the box. He looked at Earl. He smiled again. "Sir," he said, "I'm sure whatever you have is interesting. But the auction is proceeding." Earl Whitaker reached into the box. He did not take out the folders. He took out the envelope. The auctioneer set his gavel down on the table. He looked at Earl. He looked at Daniel Whitcomb. He looked at the county officials in the second row. One of them, the county clerk, a woman named Patricia Lowe, 49 years old, 8 years in the position, stood up. "How?" she said to the auctioneer. "We need to pause this." Daniel Whitcomb turned in his seat. "On what grounds?" Patricia Lowe did not answer him. She walked from the second row to the front of the room. She stopped beside Earl. She looked at the envelope in his hand. "May I see it?" she said. Earl handed it to her. She read the date on the front. She read the file number. She turned the envelope over and read the back. She opened it. She read the affidavit once. Then again, slower the second time, she looked up. She looked at Hal Reeves. "This auction is adjourned," she said. Daniel Whitcomb stood. "I'm sorry. On what authority is this auction adjourned?" Patricia Lowe held up the affidavit. "This is a file number from this office, from 1983. I can pull the original within an hour. If this is what it says it is, the owner of this parcel is not deceased, and the parcel cannot be sold." Daniel Whitcomb did not move. He was still holding his folder. "Ma'am," he said, "Heritage Land Holdings paid the county for an advance list of forfeiture parcels. We have a contract. We have a bidder commitment. If there is a clerical issue, we can resolve it after the sale closes. The buyer can be compensated. The auction can proceed." Patricia Lowe looked at him for a long moment. "Mr. Whitcomb," she said, "if this man is alive, the auction cannot proceed. Whatever your contract says." She turned to a clerk in the back row. "Get me the 1983 records, Box B, C, 1983, File 2147. I'll be in my office." She walked out. The room sat in silence. Daniel Whitcomb sat back down. He pulled out his phone. He spoke quietly. He spoke for 2 minutes. He hung up. He did not look at Earl Whitaker. Earl sat down on a bench against the wall. He put the metal box on the floor beside him. He did not say anything. The clerk returned 38 minutes later. He was carrying a brown accordion file. He brought it to Patricia Lowe's office. Patricia Lowe returned to the auction room 14 minutes after that. She was carrying the original 1983 affidavit. It matched the one in Earl's envelope. The notarization was the same. The signatures were the same. The file number was the same. She walked to the front of the room. She looked at Daniel Whitcomb. "Mr. Whitcomb," she said, "this parcel was placed on the auction list in error. The owner is not deceased. The owner is sitting against that wall. The auction is canceled." Daniel Whitcomb opened his mouth. She continued, "Furthermore, I am required to inform you that the contract Heritage Land Holdings signed with this county in January warrants that every parcel on the advance list is a clean title forfeiture. At least one of them is not. We will be reviewing the other 46. If we find more errors, we will be in touch with your firm's general counsel. Daniel Whitcomb closed his mouth. Patricia Lowe turned to Earl. Mr. Whitaker, she said, on behalf of Boone County, I apologize. We will correct the records today. We will issue a written apology. The parcel is yours. It has always been yours. I am sorry it took this long. Earl Whitaker nodded once. He picked up the metal box. He walked out of the courtroom. Roy Patterson, his lawyer, met him in the hallway. Patterson had been sitting outside the room the whole time, as Earl had asked. Patterson looked at him. How did it go? Patterson asked. It went, Earl said. Patterson nodded. He did not ask anything else. 3 weeks later, the county settled with Earl Whitaker for $112,000 in damages, $40,000 for the cost of the legal process he had been forced to undertake, $50,000 for the wrongful auction listing, and $22,000 for 41 years of administrative reinstatement. Heritage Land Holdings paid an additional $86,000 in a separate settlement. After their general counsel reviewed the contract clause Patricia Lowe had quoted in the courtroom. The total was $198,000. Earl deposited the checks in the Centralia Bank. He did not tell anyone. The next morning, Earl Whitaker woke up at 5:30. He made coffee. He drank it on the front porch of the farmhouse. The sun was coming up over the eastern fence line, behind the barn he had rebuilt in 1973. He put on his work boots. He walked from the porch to the western fence. The walk was 3/4 of a mile. He had walked it most mornings for 52 years. He stopped at the oak tree. Margaret was buried under the oak. The stone was small. It was the kind of stone she had wanted. Her name, her dates. One line beneath. She kept the records. Earl stood there for a long time. The wind moved through the leaves of the oak. The creek ran behind him. The sound of it had not changed in 52 years. He spoke once. You were right, Margaret, he said. They made it twice. He stood there a little while longer. The sun came up the rest of the way over the barn. Then he walked back to the house. He put the metal box in the closet of the spare bedroom. He set it on the same shelf Margaret had set it on in 1983. He closed the closet door. He went outside and started his truck. He drove to the feed store. He bought a sack of nails and a roll of fence wire. He drove back. He worked on a section of fence that had been leaning for 2 months. He did not tell his neighbors about the courtroom. He did not put up a sign. He did not file a complaint with the state. He did not call the local paper, although the local paper called him the following week. He did not return the call. The land was his. It had always been his. He went back to working it the same way he had worked it on August 13, 1983, the day before the county records office filed an error that took 41 years to correct. Some things, when they are taken, are not given back. Some things were never really gone. A man with a wife who kept the records, and a metal box in the closet, and an envelope from 1983, that man cannot be erased no matter what a county clerk types into a file. Earl Whitaker did not need anyone to know that. He just needed his land. He had it. If you've made it this far, you already understand why this story matters. Earl wasn't the only one. The Heritage Land Holdings advance list had 47 parcels on it. 46 other families across 4 states have already received letters identifying their land as forfeit. One of them is a 74-year-old widow in southern Illinois, whose husband's name appears on the death record filed in error in 1979. She has a box of her own. We are telling her story next. Subscribe so you don't miss it.